Everyone, we'll just wait for a few more people to join and then we'll get started. Okay, thanks for joining today. I'm Melinda Laundon, and today I'm going to begin by outlining some recent research into how education and training can support manufacturing. Then we'll be joined by Shawn O'Sullivan from TAFE Queensland, who'll join me to provide a vocational education and training perspective on the research and how it relates to some recent initiatives that TAFE is introducing. We'll then conclude with some audience questions. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which QUT stands. That's the Turrbal and the Yuggera people. These lands have always been places of teaching, research, education, and business, and I pay respect to their elders, laws, customs, and creation spirits, and acknowledge the continuing connection to the land here. So recently, Professor Paula McDonald and Jacqueline Greentree, a PhD student, and I, who are all part of Program 5 of the Cobotics Centre, the Human Robot Workforce, we undertook some research into how Australia's education and training system can support the future manufacturing workforce. So just a bit of context and background, first of all, to our research. So we know from prior research that manufacturing workers are already using Industry 4.0 technology, such as AI, autonomous robots, collaborative robots, and many others. We also know that the Australian education and training system is facing some challenges in meeting the current and future skill needs of the industry. So part of the reason for that is that Australian education and training has very complex and funding and compliance structures. So for example, vocational education and training, or VET, is mostly funded at the state level with some supplementary funding from the Commonwealth Government, while the Commonwealth Government supports higher education, and again, states mostly support schooling, particularly public schooling. So there are a number of players in the education and training system that all have a part in preparing current and future manufacturing workers. So this includes higher education, particularly those who undertake engineering degrees, vocational education and training, or VET, particularly for our diplomas and trade qualifications. There's also some trade training programs in schools and private registered training organisations that all play a part. So we know that the lack of integration between education providers, policymakers, and funders and the industry is a recognised problem that's holding back Australia's competitiveness. So one of the key themes of our modern industrial and educational policy is employability. So educational institutions are now expected to be able to produce work-ready graduates who can be straight into performing on the job, especially in industries that are undergoing major technological shifts and those with identified skills deficits that need to be met. However, graduate work readiness isn't only about the education the graduates have received. It's not only about their achievement in the education, it's not about their personal qualities solely, it's also influenced by broader conditions such as labour market and sector structures and social factors. So for this reason, we think it's important to understand a range of perspectives on how Australia's education and training system can effectively support advanced manufacturing. So this research was guided by the question of how Australia's education and training systems can support the future manufacturing workforce. We undertook interviews with 17 Australian sector-level manufacturing stakeholders, some from government agencies, industry associations and boards, unions, and also education and training institutions. So the interviews were around an hour in duration and with each person, and they gave us detailed insights into how education and training is currently supporting manufacturing and how it should do so in the future. So from our analysis of the interviews, we came up with 3 themes. The first one was that cooperative, integrated and sustained partnerships are needed between vet institutions, universities, government, industry, high schools, and private training providers as well. We know these partnerships are crucial in responding to technological skills gaps and workforce shortages, but they are complex and challenging, especially given the different history and interests and even funding arrangements of all the different players. So while they acknowledged the challenges, our participants did highlight some effective existing partnership strategies. For example, those between schools and TAFEs, where TAFEs were able to showcase to high school teachers and career counsellors the types of technologies and STEM skills that underpin many manufacturing careers. And also another effective current strategy was co-locating tech schools, where students from early in high school can actually play with robotics, find out a bit more what it's actually like to work in manufacturing and be attracted to undertake careers and courses in the field. The second theme identified that changes were needed to not only what educational institutions are teaching students who are destined for manufacturing, but also the way they're teaching it. So a common theme was that traditional trade skills are still highly valued, but emerging technologies mean that workers need to be able to combine these trade or craft skills with new digital skills and technological skills, and also some of those soft skills like problem solving, analysis, communication, resilience, and teamwork. So this pedagogy theme also emphasised the importance of infusing curriculum with digital and technology skills alongside innovative and experiential delivery modes. So we also heard from our participants that some industry people are dissatisfied with the skills of the graduates, and as a result, they're seeking to fill that gap with in-house and tailored training. Our final theme, prospects, focused on the need to be able to have forward-looking assessment and planning to respond to those industry trends and develop new qualifications, skills, and investments to meet future industry needs. So this theme highlighted the need for education, manufacturing, and stakeholders, including government, to work together to anticipate and solve emerging problems. Some of the issues we identified were the need to map current occupational knowledge, skills, and abilities to future needs, the need to design innovative ways for training to be delivered to current employees and also those transitioning mid-career from other careers, and planning for new flexible credentials and industry opportunities. So several policymakers noted that some of the previously raised potential solutions like private provision of training or migration of skilled workers were not currently and wouldn't in the future be sufficient to meet the skills gaps. They also said that forecasting changes required a holistic view of Industry 4.0 and multiple strategies. So in summary, with growing demand for digitally enabled skills to support manufacturing, we think this research provides some insights into the current limitations and future opportunities to bridge the gap between skills shortages in manufacturing and the education and training systems that can deliver graduate readiness to a digitally enabled workforce. We know that manufacturing is critical for economic prosperity and national growth, and we hope that follow-up research to this might be able to design trial and evaluate innovative approaches to education and training to determine what models offer the best potential for scaling up. So I'd now like to welcome Shawn O'Sullivan, who's TAFE Queensland's Emerging Industries Business Development Manager. And Shawn has been working closely with industry to identify and manage product development for VET in advanced manufacturing and also in renewable energies. Thanks for joining us today, Shawn. I'm going to ask you to comment on some of our research findings in relation to TAFE's role in preparing students for manufacturing. And after we have a bit of a chat, then I'll throw to the audience for questions. So firstly, our research identified that some employers aren't satisfied with the skills of VET and university graduates, and that employability needs stronger partnerships between industry, vocational education, and higher education. So can you tell us what those partnerships could or should look like in the future, please?
Yeah, thanks, Melinda. So from the conversations we've had with industry, what we've established is there's a disconnect between the expectation of what's required in VET and university and also what the expectation is in industry. Industry has a perception that they'll do training and when they come out, they're 100% qualified, and the employer has to put minimal effort into the trade for any tradesperson and also in the university sector, that they actually come out employability at full scale, full operation. What we're also looking at is seeing that the disconnect between the current trades that are out there and the skills that they're actually doing within those trade areas, and potentially how we could manipulate some of the skills and training that we're actually delivering to students to maximize highly qualified, skilled people in the industry and supporting them with potentially lower qualifications, but mentorships into more skilled and more qualified areas. We're also seeing that there's more of a drive from parents to understand what the pathway is now for a tradesperson to get into a university degree. It's predominantly not a university first choice question at the moment. What we're seeing is it's about that whole lifelong learning journey. How can we actually get my son or daughter getting into a trade? What's their career progressions? How can they can develop themselves? And what's the university degree that they can actually get at the end? We're also talking with universities. So I know we've had conversations with Jonathan Roberts, and we've also had conversations with, say, Tim Kelly about that transition from university to VET to get the hand skills and the employability part of it right, but also how we build mentorships from tradespeople into university, develop those pathways and careers. Majority of the people that are teaching at TAFE will be a professional tradesperson in their career, but then they've also gone to university. And I think that makes holistically a better person to be able to teach the trade because they understand the educational learning methodology, but they've also understood the trade and they've done that experience in there. And it's about that blend between both of them. One of the things we spoke about with the industry partner the other day was Cobotic welding. Currently, they have high-class, high-paid welders working on a cobot welder, setting it all up, running the machine. We then put towards them to say, if we did a micro-credential or a small skill set around cobot welding and we had a Cert 2 in engineering, the skilled labour would actually set the machine up, make sure the welding process was correct, and then they step away. And then the Cert 2 person is able to operate the machine, but they understand the welding process, they understand small application of what the machine's meant to do, but they don't actually have to set the welder up to make sure that the welding specifications are 100% to what they need to be. And then that high-class welder is not being, utilised in an area when they can actually go off and do secondary work on the other side. So it makes it a more financially viable application for the employer and the business. But what we're doing is creating a pathway for people with a Cert 2 to then come into robotics and welding, and then also develop those trade skills that potentially might go into robotics or cobots later on in life.
Thanks, Shawn. That's a really great example of the way that people are combining those traditional trade skills with the high level skills. Can you talk a little bit more about new innovations that TAFE's considering or implementing around micro-credentials and their benefits for not only post-school students, but also school students and employing organisations?
Yeah, so currently in the project that I'm on, we've got 33 projects across the state that's funded through the Department of Youth Justice, Small Business, Employment and Training. And it is around emerging industries, but as we all know, training packages and qualifications take 5 years to 10 years to be able to be developed. And some of these technologies that we're looking at, there's actually not qualifications or skill sets or micro-credentials that have actually been established. Some of the standards aren't even established as yet. So what we're trying to do is work in parallel with qualifications that we actually currently know. So hydrogen, for example, we're using PMA gas and process management qualifications, contextualizing them into a hydrogen aspect, and then delivering them as a non-accredited program, but we're basing it off of a national accredited program. So in the event that that qualification does come out, there'll be some sort of alignment that we can then RPL that student straight into that new unit that's been created, not have to go back and then retrain and reassess everyone at that same level again. We're then going through, and if we're building accredited units, so some of the UEG units that we're doing currently for the hydrogen safety awareness skill sets, we're actually taking back into micro-credentials. So that can be for general administration staff or operational staff around a facility or in a workshop. And then we're also taking that back into a trade taster program and then supporting that with, so we're looking at Horizon Education as a partner with us. We've signed an MOU with them. And what we're doing is using those STEM products to get in early intervention into the schools. We would like to go 7, 8, and 9, but currently with our funding requirements, we're allowed to do 10, 11, and 12. But we'll use a traditional trade unit, contextualizing it to say hydrogen or cobotics or 3D printing, composites, but we're using a traditional trade, but flavoring it with the new emerging technologies that's coming out. For students to understand that while you may be an electrician, you may actually be able to work in electronics, you could be instrument and process management, you could go into hydrogen, you could be working on electrolyzers and fuel cells. So it's about trying to develop those futuristic pathways for them, not just saying they're going to be an electrician rewiring a house. You know, so it gives them those pathways. It may change their journey from being in a trade into university because they enjoy that application. It could make them go into a trade, but they have a career prospect later on in the future to be able to then go into university and go into engineering or, you know, science or something like that. So we're trying to build those pathways early in the piece to let people know that potentially the careers that they're taking, especially in that grade 7, grade 8, their actual career opportunities and positions haven't ever actually been created yet. And they, you know, they will be developed over the next couple of years. And it's that technology change that I think they're going to be able to adapt to faster than what our current tradespeople will be able to. And I think that's a good way for us, but it's how do we support them to get the best view on what's coming in the future with the technology that's coming.
Yeah, thanks. So that sounds really important to hook the students in early on so they can understand the potential for a manufacturing career and qualification pathway, but also know that it's flexible and they can kind of adapt it as they go. So next I'd like to ask you about how TAFE is teaching and supporting student learning about cyber physical systems, since advanced manufacturing is so closely associated with the integration of physical and virtual worlds.
Yeah, so, and I suppose in that advanced manufacturing engineering aspect, it's, you know, it's an area for us that we have high capital demands. The new technologies that's coming out are very expensive, but the technology does change very, very quickly. And I think we all know, you know, capital expenses, by the time we purchase them, they're, you know, within 12 to 18 months, you know, that technology has now been superseded with better technology, but we've got to write those assets off over a 30-year period. So what we're doing is we're trying to work with industry partners and key industry partners to either get the support to do digital twinning or cloning of items so that we have that accessibility for, you know, students anywhere in Queensland. So for engineering, we have 32 campuses that might do engineering. And if we've got a digital twin of a cobot, or we have a simulated environment that they can do training on, they can be doing that from Mount Isa, from Torres Straits down to the Coolangatta area. We can do digital twinnings to support that environment. And then we actually have 1 or 2 major assets that we've purchased at key locations. And then we can actually get those students to go through and do the print. And then we'll end up, if it's like a 3D print, we can actually get that print sent out to the students. So they see the end product in the end, but they've seen it in a simulated world. And we haven't had to purchase that full asset. Or what we're actually doing is working with key partners out in industry to have items located on our campus, which is a bit of a showcase for them, but allows our teachers and students to see the current technology, and that technology rotates through. So we're not having to invest in that capital, but it does come down to very, very good and very tight, close, trusting relationships. And there's a lot of time that's invested into that. So it's potentially not a financial side of things, but the financial outlay in the end is reduced and the outcome is better because of those relationships.
Thanks, Shawn. It sounds like you've found some good ways to navigate through resource constraints and draw on some of those partnerships to make sure that students, even who are in rural or remote regions, can access the technology.
Yep.
So one of the findings of our research was that forward planning to anticipate demand for future skills is crucial. So can you please tell us what you see as a future of the Australian education and training system in preparing students for advanced manufacturing?
I would say that we're still going to need traditional trades. So all your mainstream traditional trades and higher education qualifications and degrees. But what we're going to need to see is development of skill sets that target specific areas of the skills need. Especially in the engineering sort of sector. And if we move into, say, cobots, an employer might want to invest in a cobot to do a certain application, but it's the chicken or egg conversation. I don't have anyone that's trained, and I don't really want to invest $160,000 in a cobot if it's not going to work for me. So what we're trying to do is support the employer and put the employer and a staff member through a skill set of units to understand what the technology is, how the technology can be used, and how it can benefit the business. TAFE Queensland's also got business support people that can actually do a business evaluation. So it's another aspect of the business away from the trades, and they can do a review. That was a funded program that was around about 12 months ago. But by doing that, the employer has the ability to get a series of skills and knowledge related to a topic, not a full qualification. And by doing that, they've got a little bit of a background on how that investment could actually work for them, and where they could see their business then changing for the future. By doing that, what we're actually doing is supporting the employer for their business change, but also in supporting the employee to have a future career opportunity. Potentially you go into a degree or into a diploma level qualification, which they may not currently have, but it also then allows that retention and development of staff at the lower scale, and also integrating new staff coming in with lower qualifications, because the skill set to potentially operate the cobot after it's been set up by the specialised welder isn't as high as a fully qualified welder. So then there's the pay scales that then change, and then the financial gain by turnover increases, but the actual wage doesn't double or triple because you're putting on qualified people. So there will be some barriers because the unions will want to make sure that we get full training and qualifications for people, which is justified, and also that they get the ability to be rewarded financially for those extra skills. So that's going to be a balance we have to manage. We want to recognise those extra skills and knowledge that that person has, but we want to make sure that we actually have the ability to transform manufacturing in Australia into something that we can do, not a restriction because of what we, through unions or finances or something like that. So.
Yeah, that would be quite a radical change to stop thinking about the endpoint of qualifications and start thinking about what skills and particular skill sets we need to build instead. So I just have one more question for you. It's going a bit deeper into the need to engage people in, so students as early as grade 7 to 9 to consider manufacturing careers, and in particular how we can get more girls into the sector.
It is one of those opportunities I think we have to actually change the industry. We do see a decline in that grade 10 because they've been females have been stereotyped by grade 10 that they don't do trade areas. By engaging early in those STEM programs and initiating those conversations about what the trades could look like, it doesn't have to be a very hands-on trade. It could be a technical type trade. But we're hearing from industry that females are actually beneficial to the business because of their attention to detail, the little bit more finesse. They don't do the heavy lifting like the male-dominated sort of places, but at the same time, they bring other aspects to the business. that males don't bring. So it's about that blend. It's the stereotyping of career pathways that we're trying to break down, and that's why we want to intervene early in the piece. So one of the things that we've been doing is actually running female-only classes for certain trade areas. And by doing that, the females have the ability to talk to each other and actually build that network, and they're not the minority in those groups. So we're actually running them, they're the majority. There was the discussion about potentially putting 1 or 2 blokes in that class just to see what the difference would be and how they would actually react. And it might give them a bit of an understanding of what a female feels like in a male-dominated trade area. We're currently just running those female blocks, but it's one of those things where we're also trying to acknowledge the work that female apprentices and technicians and tradespersons are doing in those industries. So women in construction are one of the big promoters of that. I know in automotive we do the same thing as well, but bringing those female elite people from the trades in and mentoring the young girls when they're in 7, 8, 9 to say, this is a trade area you can actually go into and you can dominate in this trade, and these are the reasons why. So it's actually a role model, and we're creating those programs. And employers, while it's time out of the workplace for those young ladies, they're actually supporting it overwhelmingly, where sometimes some of the girls that we've got coming in are away from work 2 or 3 weeks of the month, on some months on a roll-on, just to get those promotional activities done. So, but they're representing their company, and that's the bit that's the benefit, and it's a branding for that company as well. So that it's a mutual benefit both ways.
Thank you. Okay, we've got just over 15 minutes left, so we might see if anyone in the audience has any questions for either Shawn or I or Jacqueline or Paula, who are also on the line today. So just feel free to speak up if you have a question.
Hi, it's Greg here, Melinda. I was interested in that bridge between TAFE and uni that Shawn was talking about, and how jointly qualified TAFE educators are well placed in that bridge. Are there any specific programs or other insights on that kind of bridging process, Shawn?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the big ones that we've done in the past, and it's had really, really good success, is the Rheinmetall project. So with the building of the Land 500. So that's located over here at Carroll Park. We've had I think there was 10 of the head engineers come through and do basic hand skills, using a grinder, using a lathe, using a mill, going through and do basic welding, just so they have a bit more of an understanding. And it's about that bridge between the two. And then that started the conversation about, is there the opportunity that if a uni student's at uni, and this is where we've been talking with Tim Kelly, is lining a unit to a practical application, which is in an MEM, say, qualification, and it may be, design and develop, or they might come in and actually then design and develop that on a CNC machine. So they've got the theoretical application, but also be able to apply it into that real life scenario. And I was saying to Melinda and Paula the other day, so I was an automotive mechanic, and I went and lived in Cape York for 4 years. And while I was up there, I started a mechanical engineering degree. I did it through Uni SQ. I got to 6 years into my degree, and I got to the point where I had the separation between being an automotive technician on the floor and the engineering sector. I had no connections with industry. I was a master of my trade in automotive, but I had the engineering separation, and I basically dropped out of the degree, mainly because I didn't have that connection and that support mechanism there. So when we're looking at these things, it's the potential to bring people from trade areas into degrees to support with that skill shortage, but also bring people from degrees down to have a bit better understanding of those hand skills, makes them that work ready. I've got a mate that's an electrical engineer, and he said the first 3 months of his electrical engineer, he was pulling cables. And the boss actually said to him, you need to understand this part, because the design then becomes more of an application and you understand why that design is done that way. And I think this is where, for us, as most teachers at TAFE would have been tradespeople, they would never have aspired to be in university, but understanding the learning that you can, develop within yourself, but also for your students, you push yourself to those higher education degrees. which weren't really on the table when we were a tradesperson. So I've done 2 degrees since I've left school, and I failed school. I'd never ever envisaged that I would have gone to uni. So it's those career pathways we want to try and start establishing early in the piece, not as you have to go to uni, you have to do a trade, but these could be the pathways that you could take. And if you take a trade, it's not just a trade. If you go to uni, it's not just uni. And then that goes down to funding as well. You know, whether someone with a higher degree should actually get the ability to do an apprenticeship later on if they choose to, because they've got a higher level qualification. So we want to make sure that there's that equity there, because, you know, currently we've got fee-free TAFE, but if you've done a degree and you want to upskill yourself in a certain area, you're ineligible because you've got a degree level qualification. I don't think that is the right model at the moment, because we're actually separating that. You have to choose. So
that's very interesting, Shawn. So in my backyard in the design school, it's quite notable to me that industrial design and some of the other design disciplines have a very strong ethos of hands-on making, and we have very well equipped maker spaces and workshops where they can use CNC, or they can, you know, make furniture. So yeah, I think this is a really interesting one, because, as you say, with the example of the electronic engineer, there's nothing like actually doing something to actually understand why the design has to be the way it is.
yes,
And to get a real appreciation of that. And that's one of the reasons why our architects have to be hands-on in building models, because it's the making and the embodied knowledge that they actually need for it to just click, right? To make the design process click. And that applies also to furniture making, I think, and if you're actually doing product design as well. So yeah, I think that's a really useful pathway for us to continue to explore in Cobotics Centre as well, because in terms of whether it's coding or whether it's end effectors, there's nothing like doing it to actually drive your understanding and to see insights and even build new theory. And John will tell you, he's very hands-on. So yeah. I think that's an exciting possibility.
I think it's the testing and failing application that actually makes you learn more. You might have the theoretical knowledge there, but when it fails that first time, you then go back and you have to, you know, recap on what you've done or how you could do it better. And that's not just, and I'm not saying that's just at a university level. I'm saying that as an RTO level, you know, and the difference between the public provider, we've got, you know, our assets are our teachers and our facilities and the resources we have. Some private RTOs don't have the same ability to do that. So we teach the same qualifications with different levels of assets and equipment, but they all come out with the same qualification. Expectation from industry is they're all the same. If you don't have the ability to access those, you know, that equipment, you can't have the same outcome. So there's different degrees of competence, I could probably say.
Yeah.
Paula, do you have a question? You're just on mute.
Sorry. Thanks, Shawn. I think some of these changes that you're describing are probably long overdue. I was quite interested, you know, when you said that parents were looking for predictable career or job sort of pathways through TAFE and VET, and I wondered sort of how realistic that was, given, I mean, your own experience, and also probably that there's some truth that a lot of us in the workforce, and particularly younger people, will have a lot more than one career, and that, you know, pathways to different areas can be quite serendipitous, and they're changing very quickly in terms of the implementation of technology and robotics and AI and so on. So I just wondered about that predictability angle and what you thought about that.
This has been brought up a couple of times, and I mean, for me, it was 18 months ago when I sat in my daughter's year 11 selection, you know, topic night, and I expected to hear, what are the university degrees? You know, how do we get into university? What's the university pathways? And there was one question from one parent, and there would have been 60 to 70 questions about what trade tastes do we have? What's the pathway into a school-based apprenticeship? how do we get an apprenticeship that then goes into a degree? And I think the point that's all come from is when COVID hit, apprenticeships in Queensland, because I mean, Queensland was sort of pretty open to compared to everywhere else, our student numbers actually went up. And I don't know whether that was the same with the university side of things. So it was that security of potential. I still call myself a mechanic. Like I'm not a business manager. I still say I'm a mechanic at heart because that's my trade. That's what I did my time in, and I'll have that for me for the rest of my life. So I think it's more about that security blanket for parents now. There is a lot more Cert 2s and Cert 3s being offered at school. So that's probably a little bit more of a in the face of parents at the moment. But it's about us establishing that while they might do a Cert 2, Cert 3 in school, they may be able to do a trade and then go into university. They may be able to go straight into university, depending upon what their academic ability is, what their focus is, and where they want to go to. It's not so much about you have to choose now. It's about if you want to choose now that you do a trade, this is your option for a university entry level further on down the track. And then us also working with universities to say, how can we then work together to build a matrix of, if we have an electrician, how does that electrician then become an electrical engineer? What are the pathways, and can we create an advanced apprenticeship model that we actually put people through from the start, knowing that they'll get to a degree, but they've also done a trade at the same time. And we're having a few of those conversations at the moment. So.
Thanks for that. Do we have any other questions? Oh, Akash, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so it's really great findings and some of the things to be think about us as well. So Shawn, I'm agreed with you that with my experience in the industry as well, so there's a big difference between the expectations of companies as well as the products of the education. So my question is now from students' perspective. So most, as Paula also said that, so are they having any kind of a preparation for them to be becoming a professional after their education? So how of their perception on that to become a professional in the industry? Are they ready for that? Are they having a perception? Are they steady on that? Or are they haphazardly coming and accidentally coming to some sort of industry? So what is your experience and idea on that?
I think when someone chooses a career path in grade 12, they don't know what they're actually doing. So, potentially, and this is where we look at funding options and stuff like that, that someone might go and do a funded program and then they just decide this is actually not for me, and they change 5 years later. So I think what it is if there is that connect between, say, vet and higher learning, we actually have the ability to start building those partnerships in and that knowledge of what you can do and how you then prepare yourself for university. Because the last thing we want to do is send someone to university that's potentially not ready, doesn't understand where they need to go. So they do their trade qualification, and then there could be, management, leadership, all those sort of things built in those programs as well as a pathway into the university side of things. And they're the conversations that we're starting to have to go, how do we set someone up to do a 7-year qualification, but it's a dual Cert 3 degree, and they can be working through the degree to actually get that outcome. I suppose the big thing comes down to funding. Like, we will say we can do a Cert 3 that's fully funded, but if you go to university, then it may not be funded. So then it comes down to a financial side of things as well. So there's not that, we want to make it so there's not a restrictor there financially for a student to then go into university. It's set up and established as a career pathway that's acknowledged as a career pathway, and it is funded, and that'll benefit TAFE and universities, because we're giving those students those opportunities where potentially, from the minority sector, you may not have the ability to ever go to university. So, and if you don't want to have a HECS debt, parents can't pay for it, that is a financial restrictor. And in my case, I never went to uni because of that as well. So it's those sort of things that we need to be mindful of as well, giving that opportunity to everyone.
Yeah, and that's something that's studied a lot in the higher education research literature as well, that a lot of students even towards the end of their degrees, just don't have an understanding of what the career is that they're about to step into. And there are a lot of moves to use work integrated learning more so that students can actually experience the profession and the workplace before they get there and know a bit about it, but also know that it's the right path for them. So we've still got a couple of minutes left if anyone else has a question. Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming today, and a particularly big thank you to Shawn for that really interesting insight into some of the initiatives that TAFE Queensland is looking at to support advanced manufacturing. And
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.